What is developing now? President Trump warning of long jail sentences for those he claims spied on his campaign. As the Attorney General now says, the public needs to know if those in power put their thumb on the scale. You're watching Outnumbered Overtime. I'm Harris Faulkner. President Trump lashing out at the Russia probe. As the Attorney General now says he has questions, more questions, about how the investigation started in an exclusive interview with our own Bill Hemmer. The president tweeted this. My campaign for president was conclusively spied on. Nothing like this has ever happened in the American politics. A really bad situation. Treason means long jail sentences, and this was treason. The Attorney General, in his first televised interview since the Mueller saga began, saying he wants to find out if government officials, again, swayed anything.
I have more questions today than I did when I first started. People have to find out what the government was doing during that period. If we're worried about foreign influence, for the very same reason we should be worried about whether government officials abuse their power and put their thumb on the scale.
Quite an interview. The co-anchor of America's Newsroom, Bill Hemmer, joins me now from El Salvador's capital of San Salvador, where he sat down with the Attorney General. A little bit of a delay. You take it away.
Yeah, hey Harris, great to talk to you, and good afternoon from San Salvador, the capital city. We came here because the Attorney General came here to put a focus on immigration, street crime, gangs like MS-13, which are so prevalent throughout this country. And the Northern Triangle countries, you hear about the border attention and immigration from Honduras, Guatemala, and here in El Salvador. That was his mission, to extend a hand of support to let the law enforcement agencies in these three countries know the U.S. is still with them on that. But along comes, in a jail about 30 minutes west of the capital city, the interview we did at a prison just yesterday afternoon. He had a message clearly about MS-13. He thinks they're making progress on that. But he knew these questions were going to come about how Democrats feel about him and how they have him, they believe, in the crosshairs of their attention now, especially on the House side. But he also has the questions, too, about where he is going with his investigation. And Harris, I think for the first time, we got a true sense as to a roadmap for the Attorney General and where he at least is beginning to look. Here it is.
Well, there are two things here. One, no one's really looked at it. I think there's a misconception out there that we know a lot about what happened. The fact of the matter is, Bob Mueller did not look at the government's activities. He was looking at whether or not the Trump campaign had conspired with the Russians, but he was not going back and looking at the counterintelligence program. And we have a number of investigations underway that touch upon it, the main one being the Office of Inspector General that's looking at the FISA warrants. But as far as I'm aware, no one has really looked across the whole waterfront here.
Yeah, so you came into this job and you started asking questions.
Right.
Did you get any answers?
Well, I thought when I came in from the outside that all the questions that I had and many other people had that would be readily answered once I got in, but I haven't found that to be the case.
Now, this is why this is important, too, Harris, because you have a federal prosecutor who's been on the case out of Connecticut for weeks now. We learned that about 3 days ago. That prosecutor has the ability to question people who no longer work for the government. The Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, is doing an internal investigation right now. He does not have that authority or power, and that's the reason why this federal prosecutor is so critical. So that's the roadmap. That's where Bill Barr is headed. The Trump Tower meeting with James Comey in January with President-elect Donald Trump in his office there, and also the FISA warrants, rather the FISA court, and this dossier that's been considered very questionable by many, Harris, and that there is the roadmap.
You know, I want to know more about the Democrats on the Hill attacking William Barr and what he might have to say about the leadership and their movement on charges of contempt of Congress, because they were all ready to do it, and then we hit like a pause button.
Yeah. I think Speaker Pelosi, Jerry Nadler, leading Democrats in the House, they clearly have a list of things, objections that they have with Bill Barr, and they have made that quite clear. They had a vote in committee about contempt. They believe he came before Congress and lied. They believe the obstruction issue in the Mueller report was ignored by him. They believe he ignored other evidence, such as perhaps witness tampering. I asked him about all of this, and Harris, in a word, he will, in an action, I should say, he will shrug. This Attorney General has made it clear that although he listens to their objections, he doesn't much give it attention or the mind or the time of day. In his words, what he will tell you, Harris, is that he was the right man for the right time to come into the Department of Justice that he saw was a little bit out of its lane, and he's come back to perhaps correct it. 30 years ago, remember, he was the Attorney General under George H.W. Bush, Bush 41. Harris.
Yeah, so he doesn't just come with it looking at ways that he sees now. He's bringing all that history and experience with him. Bill Hemmer, I can't wait to tune into your podcast. Real quickly, tell me how.
You can go to Fox News Radio. You can find it online or on iTunes. It's called Hemmer Time, and all 20, 25 minutes or so are laid out there. And you hear his reaction to all these street gangs here that have been such a problem here.
Also interesting. Bill Hemmer, thank you very much. Joining me now, Republican Congressman Tom Reed, a member of the House Ways and Means Committee. An interesting day with regard to the president's tax returns. We'll get to that a little bit later. But first, I want to get your response to some of the things that Bill talked with the Attorney General Barr about in terms of where we are in the investigation and why it's happening now. The IG cannot subpoena. He doesn't have the punitive power. This will be decidedly different, a different look at the beginning of the Russia probe.
I would agree with Bill's assessment. I think what the Attorney General is demonstrating is that he's going to get to the bottom of this. And what is that quote-unquote insurance policy that these leading officers in the FBI, Schrock and Page, were talking about in regards to their text exchanges? And what we got to do is make sure that transparency is brought to this investigation and make sure that if people are abusing their power to spy on a campaign in America, that needs to be held accountable.
You know, I'm wondering what the conversations are like on Capitol Hill, because you have Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna of California on the House Oversight and Reform Committee defending the origins of the Russia probe. I'll get your response. Let's watch this together.
The fundamental investigation was not targeting the Trump campaign. It was a counterintelligence operation. It wasn't based on the dossier. It was based on intelligence gathered from a foreign ambassador who had a conversation with Papadopoulos and was concerned that the Russians were interfering. And I want to make sure that we prevent any interference.
So do you agree with that anti-Trump dossier put together by a British spy and paid for by some Democratic donor money or DNC money, do you agree that that didn't have anything to do with the beginning of the Russia probe?
I disagree with that. I think the dossier is the basis of exactly what they brought all these tools in to investigate the Trump campaign on, and I think it's been widely proven that that dossier has serious credibility questions, and that is what we have to bring transparency to in regards to completing this investigation here in the Hill.
You know, Congressman Reed, a lot of people will ask when these investigations go on, what does accountability look like? So if we find that there was a problem, inappropriate action in terms of how warrants were put together to look at the Trump campaign, and by the way, the word spy doesn't always have to be pejorative, as William Barr has said. It is what the FBI and other groups do, other agencies do, whether it's with warrant or not. What happens? How do you hold people accountable?
Well, first, you got to bring it to the public. And I think a public transparency on this will be accountability in and of itself. But then you have to pursue potential charges. If there's an abuse of power, you know, at least some sort of sanction in regards to sending the message to our law enforcement world that no one's above the law. No one should be using their power for abusive purposes in a government position such as that.
So the deadline for 6 years of the president's tax returns is 5 p.m. Eastern today in the House Ways and Means Committee per subpoena. And Secretary Mnuchin has said for weeks now and has now confirmed again to Fox News that they would honor the deadline but will not turn over the tax returns. What's next for the president's tax returns?
Well, you know, this is going to be litigated. We said that a few weeks ago because, you know, what I see here being deployed is weaponizing our tax code for political purposes. And the provisional law upon which this request is being made doesn't deal with political purposes. It deals with lawful administration of our tax code. And you've got to be very concerned that if we go down this path of weaponizing the tax code for political purposes, where does it end? This is a very dangerous slope that we're starting to commence down.
So how do you get away from a subpoena by a committee on the Hill?
Well, you know, that you look at it, whether that subpoena it was lawfully issued. What are the grounds for the granting of that subpoena or issuance of that subpoena? And at the end of the day, I think what we're going to see with this tax code provision is that they're using it for political purposes, and that is not what is authorized in regards to going after the president's tax returns.
All right, 5 p.m. Eastern today, and then this moves forward potentially to the judiciary is what we're also reading and getting from you. Congressman Reed, thank you for being with me.
It's always good to be with you, Harris.
President Trump sending a warning to illegal immigrants just a day after unveiling his new immigration reform plan centered on border security and a merit-based admissions system. The president tweeted today, all people that are illegally coming into the United States now will be removed from our country at a later date as we build up our removal forces and as the laws are changed. Please do not make yourselves too comfortable. You will be leaving soon. Kevin Cork outside the White House. Kevin.
Harris, if yesterday's immigration rollout was a mixture of policy and politics, well, today's tweets about those who are in this country right now unlawfully or anything but. In fact, you could make a pretty compelling argument that it was a straightforward message from the administration. You have two choices. You can leave on your own, or you'll be found and sent back home. And the calculation, Harris, seems fairly clear. Most Americans favor legal immigration, but an overwhelming majority of Americans disapprove of illegal immigration. Moreover, there's a feeling here at the White House that this sudden surge in asylum seekers that we're watching along the southern border is little more than a backdoor way to game our immigration system and cut the line ahead of those who've been trying to get to our country legally. Still, there's a great deal of pushback on Capitol Hill. Democrats saying this is not a serious proposal. Look at what Nancy Pelosi said in a statement last night. She said this dead-on-arrival plan is not a remotely serious proposal. Now, that happened yesterday. Then today we found out a split federal appeals court ruled that the president's decision to rescind DACA, that's the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, was unlawful. This time the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in Virginia agreeing with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in California. The key writing right here, the decision nonetheless violated the APA, that's the Administrative Pact, because on the administration record before us, it was not, repeat, was not adequately explained and thus was arbitrary and capricious. Okay, it's important to point this out, Harris. You know this, but just for the folks at home, here's the pattern. The Trump administration rolls out a policy, or they try to rescind a previous policy from, say, the Obama administration or another administration. A group will sue. They'll take it to court, usually the Ninth Circuit. They'll sometimes get a victory here and there. It ends up in the hands of the Supreme Court. Then ultimately we see what happens. But so far the Trump administration has fared fairly well there. We'll see what happens on this. But for now, back to you.
And Kevin Cork, thank you very much. Fox News alert now. An Iranian military official has issued a new threat today amid rising tensions with the United States, warning Iranian missiles can easily reach warships in the Persian Gulf and elsewhere in the Middle East. This as a Saudi Arabian state newspaper is urging the United States to carry out, quote-unquote, surgical strikes on Iran. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin live at the Pentagon with the latest. Jennifer?
Harris, the tension began building after the U.S. put Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps on the U.S. terror list last month. Now a top Iranian commander issued this threat to the U.S. military, quote, even our short-range missiles can easily reach warships in the Persian Gulf. America cannot afford the costs of a new war, and the country is in a bad situation in terms of manpower and social conditions. The head of Iran's National Security Committee in Parliament is calling for the U.S. and Iran to hold direct negotiations in either Iraq or Qatar amidst rising tensions, blaming an unnamed third party that he says is trying to stoke a war between the U.S. and Iran, a veiled reference to Saudi Arabia, whose leaders blame Tehran's proxy militias for a drone attack that knocked out a key oil pipeline, and a newspaper close to the Saudi palace called for the U.S. to carry out surgical strikes on Iran, adding tension to the standoff. U.S. defense officials confirm the USS Abraham Lincoln strike group is now in the Arabian Sea, carrying a large number of Tomahawk missiles. Quote, the next logical step, in this newspaper's view, should be surgical strikes. The U.S. has set a precedent, and it had a telling effect. The Trump strikes on Syria when the Assad regime used sarin gas against its people. Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Zarif spoke en route to China to discuss the nuclear deal, which the U.S. pulled out of a year ago, and the current oil embargo, which China has shown a willingness to break. Harris, Iran's foreign minister, ruled out direct talks with the U.S. en route to China.
Very interesting. Jennifer, thank you very much. Let's get to Boeing now with some news saying that it has repaired that critical software issue with its 737 MAX planes. Some people died because of what was going on those planes, but is it enough to restore the company's safety record and reputation? We'll get into it. And new Fox polling showing Joe Biden dominating the 2020 field of the rest of the Democrats as they struggle to catch up. But President Trump's campaign manager is now saying the former vice president is headed for a very rude awakening. Watch.
I have a feeling Democrats aren't going to all sit there and say kumbaya to each other and wait for, Biden to get up on stage and just to take it down the path. But I think that you're going to see that happen. Look, I think Biden looks tired. I don't think he has the energy to fight this president.
We're learning some Border Patrol facilities are so overwhelmed with the influx of migrants, they're now sending people to other cities for processing. This, as U.S. Customs and Border Protection says, nearly a 500,000 migrants have been apprehended so far this fiscal year. Joining me now is Robert Perez, the Deputy Commissioner for CBP, a very busy man, I would imagine. So thank you for your time. I want to just get a local and late-breaking report on what's happening right at our border right now.
Well, thanks for having me, Harris. Look, as you mentioned, our system is overwhelmed, and part of the system is our facilities. You referred to how it is we're having to move some of the migrants we've been encountering to some of the other Border Patrol stations that aren't as overwhelmed as the ones that are absolutely overcome with these families, these incredibly vulnerable populations, children, at unprecedented levels. Look, one of the many actions we've taken, Harris, is put up soft-sided facilities to augment the outdated hard-sided facilities that were never built to deal with these populations. We've put 2 of these up that can house and process up to 500 migrants apiece, one in Donna, Texas, one in El Paso, and within a day of us putting up these facilities, they were already at capacity.
Wow.
So we're going to continue to use every tool at our disposal that we can absolutely think of as far as actions that we can take, deploying over 1,000 agents and officers from other locations from around the country down to the southwest border. But make no mistake about it, Harris, we need Congress to act. We need supplemental funding has been put forth and proposed, and we absolutely need the legal loopholes to be fixed to stop this pull factor that criminal organizations are exploiting.
Here's what the president said in a tweet on border apprehensions. Border Patrol is apprehending record numbers of people at the southern border. So echoing what you're saying, the bad hombres, of which there are many, are being detained and will be sent home. Those which we release under the ridiculous catch and release loophole are being registered and will be removed later. Your response?
Well, Harris, look, I'm encouraged. I testified up on Capitol Hill last week about both, again, the resourcing requirements and the need to fix the legal loopholes. What is unquestionably happening is you have alien smuggling organizations and drug smuggling organizations taking advantage of, again, these incredibly vulnerable populations and moving them through a dangerous journey across the border. And all the while, the narcotics trafficking organizations trying to exploit the fact that at any given time, up to about 40% of our manpower is having to be dedicated to deal with the humanitarian part of this crisis. So again, Harris, make no mistake about it. Look, I'm encouraged that people are getting much more informed. We've had a lot of congressional delegations visit and see the reality on the border. but we need action now. We need the resourcing that we've asked for. We need to be able to make the legal changes that again, a lot of people are talking about right now, to keep families together during an immigration process, to treat unaccompanied children the same regardless of the country they come from, and to change our asylum laws.
Well, I fully anticipated hearing that it was getting worse from you, and it is. And so one of the things that has been reported about in the last few weeks, and this number really caught my eye because it was around 2,000 at Christmas time, that you were trying to recruit up to 7,000 people to bolster the quote-unquote too thin Border Patrol. What is going on such that you have gotten to this level, and what do you need now?
Well, Harris, look, both in the fiscal year 20 budget request and certainly ongoing, recruiting and retaining our Border Patrol agents, our CBP officers, really all our frontline employees who have been doing an outstanding job is at the very top of our list. It's an ongoing challenge for us. Certainly,
do you have the money you need?
Look, we're encouraged right now that we've already been augmented to some degree, but we need more. We absolutely need more, and that is why, again, with the forthcoming fiscal year 20 request, we're asking for more agents. We're asking for more officers because, again, I can't say enough about what it is they're doing on the front line, but that's part of that full resourcing that we've been asking for by way of infrastructure, technology, and personnel. But again, I have to say, the legal framework need be changed. We need Congress to act to help us on the front line right now, Harris.
I hear it across the board from everybody in your job, in your position, if you will, of being on our southern border, that we need Congress to act. Hopefully they will hear us. Robert Perez, second in command at Customs and Border Patrol, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
New developments in the Jussie Smollett case. A judge could assign a special prosecutor to investigate why Chicago's top prosecutor dropped the charges against Smollett. And more of Bill Hemmer's exclusive interview with the Attorney General. Why William Barr says there's more to learn about the Russia probe and how it began in the first place. Tried to kidnap a young child at a Los Angeles area McDonald's Monday afternoon. Police released a surveillance video showing a woman picking up the 4-year-old before trying to get into a parked car. Fortunately, witnesses intervened and the woman ran off. She's being held on $100,000 bond right now. That is frightening. Fox News alert. Fox top story now. Attorney General William Barr telling our own Bill Hemmer in an exclusive interview that he's trying to get to the bottom of whether government officials put their thumb on the scale during the early stages of the Russia probe and whether their surveillance of the Trump campaign was justified. Of particular interest to Barr, he says, is President Trump's meeting with the nation's intelligence chiefs just a few days before he took office in 2017. Watch.
I think there were some very strange developments during that period. That's one of the things we want to look into.
Such as?
Such as the handling of the meeting on January 6th between the intelligence chiefs and the president and the leaking of information subsequent to that meeting.
In New York City?
Yes.
In Trump Tower?
Yes.
Tom Dupree served as Deputy Assistant Attorney General under President George W. Bush, was with me when the first version of the Mueller report dropped a few weeks ago. Good to see you. How serious is this leak situation that Barr is talking about?
Well, I think it's potentially very serious, Harris. I mean, what is refreshing is that we have the Attorney General who now is getting personally involved in this investigation to figure out what happened and to make sure that this is done right. I think that there are a lot of folks who thought that once the Mueller report came out, that was all going to go away. But that's not so. What we have seen so far is that this Attorney General is not slowing down. He's not putting everything on pause. But to the contrary, he is determined to figure out what happened in those critical months in 2016 and early 2017.
I want to show now Fox polling, which shows 35% approve of Barr's handling of the Mueller report and Russia investigation, while 44% disapprove. Look, I don't want to pull you into the politics of all of this, but you can't miss the fact that they kind of moved Democrats on that contempt of Congress, which seemed like such an emergency just a few days ago. What's happening?
Well, it is interesting, and I think we're going to see the dynamics continue to shift. Look, there's no question that I think a lot of Democrats on the Hill view Bill Barr as a punching bag. I think they have a lot of frustration, not just over the 2016 election, but also with the way that the Mueller report turned out, and that they wanted the smoking gun. They didn't get it. Then they have Bill Barr up there, and they can kind of take out their frustrations on him. It doesn't surprise me that ultimately they decided to hold him in contempt. It seemed like that's the way the political winds were blowing. I think there are a lot of people on the Hill who viewed this as more of a partisan exercise rather than a fact-gathering exercise. But as I said, I think the dynamics and the political winds are going to continue to shift in the weeks ahead and the months ahead, particularly as the Attorney General's own investigation moves ahead.
When you look at this and the timing of it, and you've got the IG report coming out, and Bill Hemmer and I were talking about this early in the hour. We talked about it on Outnumbered. Look, there's only so much that Horowitz can do. He can't subpoena people who are now outside of his purview in that agency, and he can't, adjudicate punitive orders or anything like that. That would come from this type of investigation. Take me down the rungs, if you will, of the ladder that show how different this is about to be for people who were working at the FBI and the DOJ.
Absolutely, Harrison. You put your finger on it. An Inspector General investigation by its very nature is limited. An Inspector General really only has jurisdiction over people who are currently working at the Justice Department. His tools are very limited in terms of subpoenaing people, compelling testimony, and that sort of thing. All of that changes when you vest the power to control an investigation in a United States attorney, as Bill Barr has now done. He's given the power to do this investigation to John Durham, highly respected U.S. attorney from the state of Connecticut. A U.S. attorney, like any prosecutor, has robust means of gathering information, compelling witnesses to testify, whether or not they still are at the Department of Justice, to obtain documents and all those sorts of things. So I think we are going to see a significant increase in the seriousness with which this investigation is pursued in the months ahead.
Real quickly, what do you do if somebody had their thumb on the scale, as William Barr has put it?
Absolutely. Look, if someone had their thumb on the scale, I think, number one, you have to find out whether or not it amounted to a violation of criminal law or whether it amounted to a violation of Justice Department regulations. If it did, then I think you have to look at what the next step would be, whether that's some sort of referral to a prosecutor, whether that's some sort of internal disciplinary mechanism. The first thing to do is find out what happened. Once we know that, then we can assess what sanctions, if any, should be imposed on wrongdoers.
This is so interesting. This is exactly what Bob Mueller did. Right? Southern District of New York, we never said it so many times until cases were going to these different prosecutors. John Durham has gotten cases overturned. He is a bulldog by reputation. It will be interesting to see. Glad we're breaking it down together, Tom Dupree. Thank you.
We will stay tuned. Thanks, Harris.
A Chicago judge deciding to hear more arguments on a petition to appoint a special prosecutor who can investigate whether State Attorney Kim Foxx mishandled criminal charges against Empire TV actor Jussie Smollett. That judge set a May 31st court date for additional arguments. Matt Finn is live in Chicago. This did not go away.
There is a lot to keep track of in this Jussie Smollett saga. The latest today in court a short while ago, there is a petition for a request for a special prosecutor to be assigned to investigate Kim Foxx. A ranking judge here in Chicago did not deny that request. Instead, he set a hearing 2 weeks from today where he wants to hear arguments for and against a special prosecutor. Now, this latest chapter in the Jussie Smollett case began last month when former Illinois Appellate Justice Sheila O'Brien filed a petition requesting an out-of-county prosecutor be assigned to lay fresh eyes on the Jussie Smollett criminal case and also investigate how Kim Foxx's office handled the case. Justice O'Brien says the public deserves to know the whole truth. The chief judge of Cook County Criminal Court was set to make a ruling on that special prosecutor last Friday, but he passed the case to another judge because he has a son who works for Kim Foxx. So today, the new judge in charge decides he wants to hear more evidence from Justice O'Brien on why a special prosecutor should be assigned, and also wants to hear Kim Foxx's arguments against it. In her petition, Justice O'Brien questions Kim Foxx's motives, alleging Kim Foxx meddled in the case even after she recused herself. Foxx later admitted she never legally recused herself. And today in court, Justice O'Brien said Kim Foxx, quote, said one thing and did another, and Kim Foxx's veracity is at issue. O'Brien also pointed out that one of Kim Foxx's assistants told Foxx that Illinois law requires a special prosecutor should have been appointed when Kim Foxx recused herself. Kim Foxx has argued that a special prosecutor was only required if she became sick or was unable to fulfill her duties, while Justice O'Brien argues that Kim Foxx admitted she was unable to fulfill her duties when she recused herself. Harris.
Wow. All right. Thank you very much. Like I said, it isn't going away. Boeing says it has repaired the critical software defect in its 737 MAX jets, which caused the planes to automatically tilt in certain cases. The company says it's now working with the FAA to schedule a flight test. All of this, of course, after airlines across the globe grounded planes following 2 deadly crashes. A lot of people lost their lives in this. Dan Springer, live for us in Seattle. Dan?
Yeah, hi, Harris. Boeing made the announcement late yesterday that it was done with its software fix and is ready to prove that it works to the FAA and other regulators around the world. In a statement, Boeing CEO Dennis Muilenburg said, "With safety as our clear priority, we have completed all of the engineering test flights for the software update and are preparing for the final certification flight." After the second fatal crash, this one in Ethiopia, it was clear that the 737 MAX planes had a problem with their anti-stall system called MCAS. The system automatically pushed the nose of the plane down when a sensor thought the plane was climbing too steeply and in danger of stalling out. A faulty sensor was a key factor in both crashes, along with pilots having to fight the plane to manually bring the nose back up. The new software adds a second sensor that must agree with the other one before MCAS engages, and the system will only turn on once. Boeing says it's tested the fix 360 hours on 207 test flights, and it's now ready to prove it works to the world. Once regulators get their formal questions answered, the FAA will schedule its certification test flight, and after that, Boeing will submit for final certification. Yesterday at a congressional hearing, the acting head of the FAA said the agency will be thorough.
We will receive Boeing's application for a design modification to the MCAS system, and we will thoroughly evaluate that and their system safety analysis. We will evaluate to bring that to certify that new software system.
And next week is a very big week for them. Regulators from around the world will meet with the FAA in Washington, D.C. to discuss the new software and try to come to international agreement that the MAX planes are ready to fly again with passengers. Harris?
All right, Dan, thank you very much. A legal battle is now looming after the Trump administration pulled nearly $1 billion in funding for California's controversial high-speed rail project. Keep watching. The Trump administration is now canceling nearly $1 billion in federal funding for California's high-speed rail project, one reportedly that was dealing with mismanagement of cash and other issues. Governor Gavin Newsom is vowing a court fight over it all. Jeff Paul is live for us in Los Angeles with the story. Jeff?
Harris, the Trump administration had long threatened to pull the funding, and now they have officially done just that, going through the U.S. Department of Transportation to pull off the move. The Federal Railroad Administration says the state has failed to make reasonable progress on the project. Additionally, California has abandoned its original vision of a high-speed passenger rail service. The agency also saying it's looking into all options on getting back $2.5 billion in federal funds it had already awarded the state for the project that was originally supposed to connect San Francisco to Los Angeles. A few months ago, after several delays and higher than expected costs, California Governor Gavin Newsom proposed scaling back the scope of the project and focus on finishing a line that runs from Merced to Bakersfield. This area, the Central Valley, is considered one of the most economically distressed regions, and the project would help create jobs and connect the area to a more prosperous coast of California. Some experts who've been following this project view this purely as a political move that might not hold up in court.
I think this will tie up a lot of attorneys and taxpayer dollars' time in court to try to fight this. I don't think it makes much of a practical difference in the short term on the ground. And it's really just a political signal to Trump's base that, hey, we're taking this punitive action towards California.
Harris, this will all likely now be decided in court.
Like so many things. Great to see you, Jeff. Thank you. A big night this Sunday on Fox News. Chris Wallace will host a town hall with 2020 Democratic candidate Pete Buttigieg. Steve Hilton will sit down with President Trump for an exclusive interview on his new immigration plan and the 2020 race. Here's just a part of what he had to say about Buttigieg.
We've got the town hall with Pete Buttigieg. Buttigieg.
There you go. This weekend. Just one thing on him, putting aside policy disagreements. Don't you think it's just great to see the fact that you've got a guy there on the stage with his husband, and it's normal. It's not even seen as a big deal.
I think it's absolutely fine. I do.
But isn't it a sign of great progress in the country that's just...
Yeah, I think it's great. I think that's something that perhaps some people will have a problem with. I have no problem with it whatsoever. I think it's good.
Town Hall airs Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, followed by The Next Revolution at 9 p.m. with my friend Steve Hilton. We're coming right back. Outnumbered Overtime. Oh, gee, baby. So Dr. Manny just said, how long does this last? He's like,
I was ready to just move now.
Let me give you a couple of highlights during the TV version of us. Okay. And this is why I love doing TV with Elizabeth McDonald. She said, is the administration throwing fastballs past the American people with its economics numbers? And then she said, and I can't remember the context, but she said these words, drunken Apple women.
Oh, yeah.
By the way, that's a hashtag on the live chat.
That's a hashtag right now?
And then you dropped, like we all have that little way to unwind or whatever. You dropped some knowledge on me, as Andrea would say, because I like a little, that drink that you drink. I like the grapefruit flavored, but just a touch of vodka. And you said don't mix the two.
Well, look, the question on the table had to do with alcohol and how to mix it. And of course, you wanted to know what to do if you have a hangover. I just said keep drinking. But
he's pointing to
is that true?
By the way.
Right.
That's what I do. Don't
by the way,
don't do as I do. Do as I say. One of the problems I'm having is that a lot of people are mixing these canned goods, whatever, of different drinks and mixing it with alcohol. Mm-hmm. And you got to pay attention because a lot of them, for instance, there's a lot of caffeine in a lot of these energy drinks. And like my son, who's in college, is giving me a heart attack because he likes to drink vodka and Red Bull. And I keep saying to him, look, the problem with mixing drinks with some of these canned goods is that you don't realize how drunk you're getting, and you can have alcohol toxicity. The problem that people get into trouble, whether you get sick or not, is the alcohol toxicity. So grapefruit juice, in my opinion, this is why you don't take grapefruit juice sometimes with certain medications because of the liver metabolism. I don't like to drink anything that may hamper my liver metabolism.
What does grapefruit do to the liver, though?
It doesn't do anything to the liver. It's just that there are certain enzymes that are very sensitive to some of the chemistry of grapefruit, and therefore you have to be careful how you metabolize.
So it erases those enzymes?
It interferes with the natural functionality of it sometimes.
Do you get drunker?
Certain medications.
Do you get drunker? I feel like I would get drunker if I would drink a sugary drink and vodka, for example.
Well, because it's the same thing. You basically are fooling your brain. Look, sugar is the food of the brain, right? So the oxygen and sugar, that's what it needs in order to be alive. So that if you begin to give a lot of sugar, so your energy level is up.
You eat a lot of sugar.
But in reality, your alcohol content, and that's the problem that we have.
So I am a champion for I stick to martinis, so I'm a complete champion in your book as to how to drink right.
Right, keep it straight.
A couple questions, Dr. Manny. One, I'm assuming the more sugar, then the worse the hangover.
Bingo.
Okay, and then, so my drink of choice is either vodka fresca with a dash of grape juice or vodka club soda with a dash of cranberry. What am I doing wrong?
You're not doing anything necessarily wrong. I like the latter better than the former.
Because that's got great.
Because that gives you a little bit of hydration, a little bit of the cranberry, the cranberry, which is very good for your kidneys.
Can I ask a question?
There you go.
Look at how healthy I was last night.
Manny, because I love this story, because you do have St. Patrick's Day coming up, and we want to mitigate the hangover. It's all about the hangover.
That's right. Thank God.
So it's called fatty congeners. In other words, the dark liquors can create these fatty molecules that hold the liquor or alcohol in your stomach, and it takes longer to digest, whereas clear liquor like vodka and gin goes through your system more quickly. Is that true? Does that sound right?
I think, I think the thicker liqueurs of any kind.
Like a Bailey.
So like sometimes I get a little fancy Jägermeister. I like a little bit of Jägermeister sometimes with my beer.
Drambuie.
See, I was a big
wild
Drambuie.
turkey.
A big
Drambuie. What are you, 8-year-old man? Who drinks Drambuie?
That's what my dad.
Harvey's Bristol cream. I go home and have a little Harvey's Bristol cream.
Those drinks have a lot of sugar. Just getting to the point that Andrew was making, they do have a lot of sugar. That's when you get.
All right, let's get back to live chat because it's on
They've
fire
been waiting.
right now. Cinders Gremlin says, ginger ale and Captain Morgan, please. Not substantive, but I thought
sounds good.
put it in the conversation too. They want to go back to vaccinations, so let's go there. What did I do with it? Heck fire. I can't find that person. Oh, wait. Are the measles outbreaks from all the illegal children coming in not immunized? Something to think about. J.D. Lucas. All right. There was a Representative Brooks, congressman, who brought this up earlier this week.
Is that from California, that person? Or?
I think he's from California. I'm going to look it up quickly, but I know that that's his name. And he brought this up, and he said, look, can we just ask the question? Because, I mean, we've had some 90,000 of them estimated come into the country in the last 15 months or so from places like Central America, not necessarily places that border us.
There was a report that indicated
but not necessarily places that border us where we might be having some open immunization clinics, because we do that sort of thing on our borders.
Well, I'm going to tell you, that's a legitimate question because we don't have any clinical data, no information whatsoever from illegal immigrants that come to this country, so you really don't know. One thing I could tell you, Mexico has a pretty strong vaccination program, especially
which we help work with,
right?
Didn't we?
So we developed that, and so kids in particular that are coming from Mexico